Welcome to Hive Mind Community Podcast, brought to you by TechSoup.
Social media became maybe the most sophisticated space of employing humans to generate income for these few companies in a way that people did not experience as employment. Maybe employment is the wrong term. I should correct myself because it's not labor the way we usually experience labor. We are getting tired. We are not becoming happier as a result of spending our lives on social media. We have data proving that. There is a lot of research into negative correlations between our well-being and spending a lot of time online and having interactions in online version rather than offline version. But for a long time, people thought it's a service. And I think it's only very recent, maybe 5 years, when the debate shifted, when the narrative, not the debate even yet, but the narrative around social media shifted with people experiencing more and more difficulty observing these negative effects. I would say nothing is wrong if we accept their business logic, right? And this business logic is something we never consented to. So society moved to these platforms without understanding, as we described, the business logic behind that. But the moment we realize it, there really should be no surprises. So it's a simple triangle in which a profit-making company creates infrastructure, creates interfaces, easy-to-use applications, and algorithms that are key in this, and I will go back to them in a minute. There are users, people called users, which makes them passive, which makes them sounds more like what we really do, which is getting addicted to these services and passively experiencing what happens there rather than co-creating or participating, if you like, or consciously choosing our interactions. So there are users that are passive. I sometimes call them us because I'm included in this group, obviously. Digital biomass. It's a provocation to show how little agency, in my opinion, we have. It's not to say we want it that way, but that's how it works. We don't have much agency. We are processed for something that is sold to the third party in the triangle, which is paying agents, advertisers, but also political parties, every group, even non-profit, that can afford to pay for access to attention. We used to call it advertising. Now, I think sponsored content or sponsored interaction is maybe more fair way of explaining it because what this third party pays for us to see, it's hardly ever advertising in this classic way, soap ad or shoes ad, click on it and buy. Not really. It's sponsored content that is there to shape our understanding of the world, our understanding of what's going on in politics, to influence our voting, if we talk about democracy, but also to influence our life choices, our careers, our consumer choices, not specifically which shoes I buy, but more whether I will consume within a certain lifestyle or not. So this is the triangle. And what mechanisms these paying agents have at their disposal depends obviously on the platform, on the key agent organizing all that. The key agent organizing all that does everything that can be done with data. So the more data you have about people, the more you can do, obviously. And I think this is the major shift in Europe past decade. We've been observing more regulation, more compliance, which means that in Europe it has never been possible to use as much data as US-based entities had. People clicking on certain type of content or specific content even, they have certain opinions on politics. And that correlation is established. After that happens, that knowledge is applied to a particular person. And this is when it becomes personal again. So the patterns are not personal in the sense that they describe us as society. They are statistical, indeed. But because of other data that the platform has and the advertiser usually brings as well, like email, of a specific person connected to postal code and other data, making that communication very personal. Like, hi, Joe, we know something about you. Maybe you want to learn about our program, right? Which covers this sensitive issue you've been just reading about. And we sort of understand your opinions, right? And we will work with this understanding of your opinions. That communication is very personal and can be, well, that's the discussion. When that becomes unfair, yes, it's not black or white. I'm not saying that political parties should not have access to information about their voters. Not at all. I'm saying it's not fair when they gain access to our deep profiles, fears, desires, convictions we would not reveal in a survey because of what we do online. And that's exactly the value added, so to say, that big platforms that observe human behavior en masse, on huge scale, all the time, without asking us whether they can. They just assume they can. That was the surplus they generated, right, in their own model of profit making, as Zuboff describes very well. They never ask for consent to do that. And by having this surplus, by having all these analytics, by understanding these patterns, they could sell something exclusive, something nobody else had, which is understanding of how human beings behave, how they interact with content, what triggers them. And that combined with offline data, with advertisers' data, enabled micro-targeting in commercial ads and in political ads. And then we understood that problem. It became a political problem in Europe. It became a political problem, I believe, in the US. But it was only in Europe where we still have regulation covering this. So as a result of Cambridge Analytica scandal and realization of the stakes here, at least in Europe, we went further in prohibiting use of sensitive data for political advertising, exactly to tackle this problem. It's not done. This fight is still in progress. We live in the time where Facebook speaks about the possibility of requesting real money for the service if people don't want to get ads or profiled ads. So that's their response to this problem. They say, you don't want to be profiled? Then pay us. So they make this triangle break. They say, we can break this triangle in which you are being profiled and you are being sold. You are not you, your attention. Your attention and your behavior profile is on offer for advertisers. You don't want that? Okay, then become the client, the paying client. In business world, it's fair. I would say this transaction is much more fair than the triangle in which we are passive digital biomass. But what happens if this transaction comes in the moment of our civilization when we are dependent on these platforms, and the more fair of working with them, describing them, is to treat them as public infrastructure? Can you imagine this transaction in public infrastructure? When a hospital comes to you and says, okay, I know you need this vaccine, I know you need this treatment, so how about we talk about money now, right? It's not fair at that moment of their development when they become critical for social communication, including political communication. So this is why it gets so tricky right now when these companies, these big companies, start talking about money, because they've been pushed to talk about money by regulators, policymakers, civil society, challenging them on their business model, saying, no, you can't do that. You can serve ads, but you should not sell people attention and people's vulnerabilities. Regulation is only worth as much as practices around that and enforcement of this. So in Europe, we do have sound rules that on the face prohibit most of the practices that happen online, including manipulative interfaces called also dark patterns, including this deep tracking, going beyond what's necessary for the service, micro-profiling, micro-targeting, and this behavior profiling. But that happens. It happens because businesses argued for many years that they have right to do so, and people did not go against them because they did not understand that they can even go against this model. They've become used to this model, even addicted to this model. So because of that dynamic in which the old law proved not efficient, European Union came up with the new wave of regulation, which is designed for the large platforms and exactly to tackle their power as we see it now, the fact that they become monopolies on certain markets or oligopolies, which includes this element of unfair price. Yes, it's important to realize that even if you apply competition law, so no human rights, nothing idealistic, just looking at the market, what happens now online with these huge companies dividing markets, advertising markets, social media market among themselves, if you look at this, you see that they're asking unfair price for the service. Unfair price in data, in attention, in how much time people spend there and what people are, I wouldn't say forced to do, but how we experience online services is not beneficial for us. And that story can be told in economic terms as well, because we pay we use our resources to spend our lives on these platforms. It's not just waste of time. It's much more than that. It's economic well-being. It's the money we are not making while scrolling. It's the attention we pay to things that we see in our newsfeeds rather than something else. It's our free time that we waste sitting in front of screens. This is causing physical damage, psychological damage. As societies, we observe big harms that can be also calculated in economic terms. So all that has been looked at by European Union as social problem. So what happens on online platforms, social media platforms, now is not framed as individual choice problem or a failure of choice, like we discussed that according to previous laws like GDPR. According to GDPR, it's sort of your personal choice whether you consent or not to your data being processed. And most of us, as I explained, are fed up and frustrated with all these banners that really lead nowhere. So people will not exercise this choice. But even if they exercise it, the business model becomes the same, remains the same. We are the target and not the client. If you want to question all that, you need a regulation that is not based on individual choice. You can't ask people today, do you want to continue smoking? Do you want to continue taking drugs that you've been offered all your life? Because we live in the world where generations have grown with these services offered to them, and they don't understand that internet could be something else. I compare this to drugs or gambling, because we have strong scientific evidence confirming that mechanisms in our brain work exactly the same way when we are addicted to substances or casino and when we are addicted to social media. This is the same, dopamine cycle, the same vulnerability, the same sort of mechanism that works against us. And approaching especially young, addicted person and offering them something else, like maybe you want to go for a run instead of sitting here and doing what you've been doing for last decade to feed your dopamine cycle, it won't work. It's just unrealistic that people get out of this loop themselves. So this is where another wave of regulation came in with much higher expectations towards large platforms, with concrete solutions that we can explain deeper if we want to spend more time on it. But one of them, I think the most meaningful one, is the obligation for large platforms to assess risks. So now in Europe, they are treated as companies that create risks.
Looking for more resources in topics like countering disinformation, cybersecurity, personal and organizational resiliency, building positive narratives, or media literacy? Visit the Hive Mind platform, an online hub with free content, tools, online courses, and ability to connect with digital activists across the globe. Embrace the power of community with Hive Mind.